So make sure you're asking the right questions. And as part of this, I want you to encourage clients to ask themselves questions with the following format. Now, before I give you that format, I want to make sure you understand the whole concept of them asking themselves questions. So it's not as if you're going to necessarily sit down with them and say, okay, now it's time for you to ask yourself a series of questions, and in the next half hour, you're going to do that. That's not really the way it works. The way it works is you train them that in each situation they encounter, whether with you or alone or sometime in the future, they will ask themselves a series of questions. And this is designed to have them able to act as their own people who bring the answers out of them. So in other words, they could have a third person or other people bringing the answers out of them through a series of questions, but how about empowering them, since that's what this is all about? How about empowering them to ask themselves the right questions? That way, they eventually don't need you. And I keep talking about them not needing you, and I know that you may be developing more and more concern about you working yourself out of a job by empowering them too much, but you've got to believe me on this. You've got to believe me when I say that the more you empower them, the more they're going to like you, and they're going to look for other opportunities for you, or they're going to recommend you to friends or colleagues, or they're going to write stellar testimonials for you that you can use on your website or brochure or anywhere else you make a presentation. So give them the gift that keeps on giving, which is the ability to reach into themselves and pull out the answers. And you want to encourage them to ask themselves questions, because so many times clients get to a point where they feel they must turn to somebody else. They have to lean on somebody else. What if they had the power to do that themselves? What if they had the power to go through a series of questions, ask themselves these questions, find out the answers? Not all the answers will be clear, but find out the answers to the ones that are forthcoming from themselves and move forward. They're going to thank you in that moment. And every time that happens in the future, they're going to thank you for that ability. They're going to be very grateful to you. And when clients are grateful to you, that translates into a number of things. First of all, beyond the testimonials, beyond them referring you to someone else, you can probably have someone else call them, because people may want references from you in the future. They want to call 3 people you've helped. They call them up and they say, yes, I was empowered by their techniques. So, first question that I want you to encourage them to ask themselves, or the first type of question. Remember, we're talking about a format rather than specific questions. So the first point in the format, which can be translated into a number of questions actually, would be open-ended, broad questions that ask who, what, when, why, where, and how. Questions can be phrased in such a way that they're very narrow. For example, if a client comes across a challenge and they're not really certain how to overcome it, they don't know what to do, they don't know the steps they're going to take to push through it, to move forward, well, they may be stuck, and they may not know the different options that are involved in that challenge. If you open their minds up to open-ended, broad questions, then they realize all the players involved and all the possibilities involved. So when we get too focused, when we get too narrow on our thinking, when we're in a challenge, sometimes we don't realize that a lot of the key elements are just variables. For example, if I'm going into a situation where I'm considering making some sort of a change in my business, I'm considering changing the way we do things. Maybe we've been using in-house employees, and now we're going to shift to people working at home from their homes, telecommuting as they used to call it. Now it's just commonplace actually, but people working at home, and they would become subcontractors instead of employees. So I'm considering doing that. I've hired you as a life coach, I'm thinking of doing that, but I'm stuck. I'm not sure if that's what I want to do. So the question that might come to my mind is, do I want to do that? But that fails to take into consideration the open-endedness of it all, the broadness of it all. Because I can ask myself who. In other words, who will be the subcontractors? I may think it's just limited to my employee base. It may not be. I may be able to subcontract out to other countries now. If they're working at home remotely anyway, what do I care if they're working in another country? I can ask what? What will they be doing? I can ask when will I be doing this? Because maybe there's not such a pressing time limit that I think there is. Maybe I really don't have to do this starting next month. So you see, as I go through these questions, I get distinctions. The more questions I ask myself in an open-minded way and an open-ended way, the more possibilities I get. I want you to encourage your clients to ask themselves probing questions to gain more detail. Okay, so maybe I know who. Maybe I'm going to use my current employees and I'm just going to have them work at home. So I know who. All right. So now I can probe a little more deeply into who. Let's drill down a little bit into that. Okay, so I've got 5 employees, let's say. Let's just make this up. I've got 5 employees, we'll say. And instead of working in my office from now on, remember, I've hired you as a life coach, thinking of changing to a system in which they're going to be working at home, not at the office anymore. That's going to save on expenses. That's going to save on all sort of hassles of getting people there on time, and even little things like providing toilet paper and providing paper towels and providing soap. All that's gone. They're working at home. That's up to them now. No longer is it an issue of providing coffee and so forth and parking. That's all gone. So I've eliminated a lot of challenges just by having everyone work at home. But now I want to probe down a little more deeply. Do I really need everyone who currently works for me in the office to work at home? Or maybe I need some people to work at home, some people still in the office. Maybe there are things that happen in the office that need to happen in the office. Maybe deliveries still come, and I don't want to handle those. Boxes come, and somebody needs to sort those. Mail comes to the main office. I don't want to deal with that. So somebody's got to stay at the main office. So as I probe down a little more deeply into the word who, into that category, I find there are sub-questions, and I've learned to ask these of myself because you have empowered me. So I can say who. Does that mean everyone, or does that mean some people? Also, is this an opportunity for the business to slim down a little bit? Can some employees be given other jobs? Can some, unfortunately, be let go? Because sometimes companies are going to want to slim down. They're going to want to trim the fat, as it were. They're going to want to eliminate positions that really aren't necessary. Maybe they're becoming leaner and meaner, as they say. So you never know. So the word who carries with it a lot of sub-questions, and you can probe into that. Maybe you've got 2 people doing the job at the office that really one person working at home could do. And you've just kind of hired people because the company was forming. You didn't realize what was going on. You just had a hole and you patched it. You had something that had to be handled, so you hired someone to handle it, not realizing the redundancy of that. So that's a possibility. So as you ask who, or as I learn to ask who, because you trained me to do that, I can get some answers. I can ask the right questions, which in this case are probing questions. Also, I want you to encourage your clients to ask clarifying questions. They want to figure out what's really going on. So, when you ask yourself clarifying questions to help to understand the response, it gets kind of interesting, doesn't it? It's kind of like you're having a conversation with yourself. So, if I'm saying that I need only 3 employees to work at home who will become contract laborers because I had 5, let's say, and I've realized now I can go down to 3 because certain positions were created that didn't need to be created. They could be handled in a more consolidated way. Let's say 2 jobs can be handled by 1 person. So I've actually managed through a number of questions and probing questions to get down to 3 people now, thanks to what you taught me. So now I need to have a conversation with myself to clarify what's going on, to clarify more detail about this. So I've got a response for myself. I've asked myself a question. Do I need all these people? No. Once I start working at home, I can work with fewer people. Okay, so now I'm going to clarify that. I'm going to probe down, but I'm going to get more clarification. What exactly will they be doing, for example? I'm learning to ask myself that. What will they be doing? I'm clarifying the answers, because what I'm talking about here in this situation we've created, this artificial situation we've created for the example, is eliminating positions. That's really what's going on. That's what people are going to take away from this. Oh, I got fired. They're going to take away from it that the company downsized a little bit. Actually, the company is not changing because they're losing money. They're changing because there was money being spent that really didn't need to be spent. So in a sense, they were losing money, but the change didn't come because the company was going under because of losing money. It came as a logical result. So I'm going to clarify. I'm going to, in this case, make absolutely sure that that's what needs to be done, thanks to what you have taught me. So work with your clients to get them to have an internal dialogue with themselves. They're going to be talking with themselves. It's going to be as if there are two people there. One represents you because you'll initially be coaching them in this. You'll be walking them through this at first, but then after a while, they're going to learn to ask these questions of themselves. So make sure you're always empowering them. And first they ask broad questions and they probe a little more deeply. Then they clarify to make sure the answers they're getting make sense, to make sure they're not going to mess themselves up down the line. Because let's face it, when I say mess themselves up, that's a very general, vague category, but you know what I mean. Employees coming back and saying, why'd you fire me? Why'd you do that? Why? My position is important. Why did you eliminate it? So realize that what you do can have long-term implications, and what they do can as well. So make sure they're getting some clarification. What about a type of questions that's closed? And you often elicit a yes or no response and then help reach a solution. Questions that are closed sometimes are actually very helpful, especially if your clients tend to kind of wander off and not really come to an answer. Eventually, it's going to get down to that, isn't it? It's going to get down to yes or no. If you're talking about eliminating a position, it's going to be yes or no. We eliminate it or we don't. If you're talking about getting everyone to move out of the central office and work from their homes, it's either going to happen or it's not. So eventually, it has to come down to this. It has to come down to a closed question. It has to come down to something that's not open anymore. You start there, and then you funnel down. You start with an open question, you probe a little more deeply, you clarify to make sure that you know what's going on and that you're not going to make any decisions that have negative implications, especially for your client. And when they're working alone, especially for themselves, because they're taking this technology in the future, using it themselves. But eventually it's going to come down to a question that's going to require action. Open-ended questions are great because you can get a lot of information and you can probe and you can clarify and so forth. But if you never get to the action part, then all of that becomes wasted time. All of that becomes an exercise in futility, because the futility comes in the sense that it's a futile effort to go through something that's so elaborate, even if it's just in your mind, and not do anything. What have you done? You haven't done anything. So let go of futility and embrace the process, which is a funnel and leads to action. Action is what you are all about teaching them to take. You want them to take action. You want them to move forward, not just any action, well thought out action. So eventually you get it down to a closed question and you get a yes or no. And it could be something like this. The open-ended part would be considering doing it, and the probing would be probing down into each of those. Who, what, when, why, where, how. Probing down into each of those individually. And then clarifying, okay, we've got clarification about the who, we talked about that. And are we actually doing something that's productive when we eliminate those two positions and go down from 5 employees to 3 contractors? And then the closed part becomes, do we do this? Do we eliminate these positions in the who category? Do we eliminate Sally and Joe? Yes or no? So for your homework, I'm not going to tell you what your homework is yet, but for your homework, I want you to find a partner. And let me give you some insight into the whole find a partner idea. I want you to find someone you can work with, someone you trust, someone who's close to you. It doesn't have to be a life coach per se, but if you have access to another life coach, that's great. It can just be a friend. It can be a neighbor. It can be your spouse. It can really be anyone, but someone who's really open-minded and open to changing and helping you change. Don't choose someone who you feel is just going to go through this, just go through the motions and tolerate it and put up with it and who really isn't into it. Don't choose someone like that. I want you to choose someone. When I say choose a partner, I want you to choose someone who you feel is a dynamic thinker, someone you can learn from. Doesn't have to be, as I've said, doesn't have to be another life coach. But if you can find someone who is in a helping profession of some sort, a therapist, counselor, doctor, someone who is a person who likes to help other people, that will be tremendous for you. Because then you're not just going through the exercise that I'm going to tell you about. You're actually going to learn something from them as they go through the exercise and they have their own insight into it. You see, it's one thing to experience something. Let's say you go to another country. Let's say you go to Italy. If you don't live in Italy, let's say you go to Italy and you go to Rome and you walk around. Well, it's one thing to do that. You have your own ideas about Rome and what it means, and maybe you want to see the Vatican and so forth. But somebody else is going to bring their experiences. They're going to help you see it through their eyes. You're going to gain insight into that experience that you would not have had access to had you not brought them along, had you not gone with them. It's going to be a more rich experience for you. It's going to be a more well-rounded experience for you. So when you travel, it's great to travel with other people. And when you do an exercise, it's always nice to do it with someone else. So any of the exercises that I have you do or that you feel you can do on your own as a result of what I'm teaching you, it's great if you do them with other people because you gain so much more. Rather than just going through the activity itself and getting what you would get, you get a double benefit. And so do they. They get a benefit they wouldn't have ordinarily had. They wouldn't have ordinarily even thought of that exercise, but you've brought them into it. So two people gain, and you gain by seeing things through their eyes. And that is a wonderful process to go through. So, with your partner, I want you to have your partner write down a secret on a piece of paper. Now, the secret can be anything. For example, it can say, my favorite number is 11. But I don't want you to know what the secret is. Okay? So I don't want you to know what it is. So all you're doing is having them write down something on a piece of paper. Now, when I say secret, I don't want you to have them write down something that they really don't want to tell anyone. It's not something that's life-probing. It's not something that's going to be one of their deep secrets that they really shouldn't share with anyone else or that you'd rather not know, especially if it's a close friend of yours. So when I say secret, what I really mean is just something that you don't know about them. And it can be very general. It can be something like, for another example, their favorite food, as long as you don't know it. It can be something along the lines of their favorite color. Any of the favorites would be good as long as you don't know. It can also be their middle name. Let's say you don't know their middle name. It can be something like that. So it doesn't have to be a favorite. It can be something that you simply don't know. Okay, so all you want to do is have them write down something that you don't know and that you are going to use, because in the next part of the exercise, you're going to find out the beauty of this, find out what's really going on, what I'm getting at. But I want you to start thinking now about who you can ask. Is it going to be a friend? Is it going to be a coworker? Is it going to be someone else in your field? Is it going to be a therapist or a doctor? Who is it going to be? I want you to choose wisely. Choose someone who you feel will bring something to the table, if you haven't already. If you haven't already chosen a person in your mind. So now that you know what you're going to have them do and you see a little bit about where this is going, maybe you need to refine who you're going to ask. Now, realize that you can do this several times. In fact, that's tremendous. If you do this homework or any other homework several times, that's going to give you even more insight. Let's say you travel to not just Rome with that person, but you travel to Tuscany and you travel down to Sicily and you travel to a variety of places. You gain more, don't you? You learn more. You see more through their eyes. So realize that you can do this several times with several different people, or you can do it several times with the same person by having them choose different secrets each time. So now that you have your partner in your mind, and once you work with them, you're going to have them write down a secret. It could be pretty much anything, as long as you don't know it, and as long as it's not too revealing, because we're not trying to get to any deep psychological hidden secrets they have. Just something fairly straightforward. I want you to ask your partner questions until you figure out what is written down. Okay, ask your partner questions until you figure out what they wrote down on that paper. Now, they wrote it down, and the paper is somewhere where you both know where it is, so it's not going to change. It's also not something that they have in their minds that can change. Not that they would do that, but just to be safe, it's written down. It is what it is. You're going to ask a series of questions until you figure out what is written down. And of course, the reason you're doing this is so you can figure out for yourself and see for yourself the beauty of questions. Pay attention as you ask questions. In fact, you may want to write your questions down. You're going to realize that certain questions are ineffective and certain questions are more effective. Certain questions are just going to be essentially filler. You're going to start out with something and it's really not going to go anywhere. You see, when you work with clients, there is an answer. Usually there are several answers. There's usually no right or wrong. For example, in the idea of the company downsizing and having people work at home and become contractors instead of employees, there's probably no right answer. There are probably several, maybe 5 or more, appropriate answers that will work. Have 1 employee stay, go down to 4 employees, maybe you can go down to 2 employees, maybe don't do anything, maybe have everyone continue to work at the office. There could be several answers which are all appropriate and will all work. So realize that the questions are how you get to the answers. So you're going to learn this yourself, how to ask appropriate questions. This is going to translate into you working with your client to guide them through asking appropriate questions. Eventually, it's going to lead to them being able to ask themselves appropriate questions. And along the way, you're going to gain some skills for your own life and your own business about asking appropriate questions. Because eventually, it may come down to you asking questions like that. Should I downsize or not? Should I expand or not? So enjoy the process, enjoy learning, and remember, ask your partner questions until you figure out what is written down. Now realize that the more variety of questions you use on all 4 types of questions, the quicker you will find the answer. You're going to find it more quickly if you ask the right types of questions. So the beauty of this is doing it several times with the same person and then doing it more times with another person, because that way you're going to see how it works and you're going to get better at it. You're going to find out that you get much better at it. You're going to find out that you get more streamlined in your questions. You're going to find out that certain questions you just get rid of right off the bat. You don't even waste your time asking because you know they're not going to lead to anything. You realize that you're going to kind of corral the answer. You're going to cut off possibilities for its escape. You're going to start cornering the answer through a series of questions. But the questions should be strategic. They should cover varieties, variety of types of questions. If you ask questions that are all yes or no, you may find it difficult to get to the answer. You may find the answer kind of eluding you, kind of staying out of your way. You're not really corralling it anywhere. But if you start with broad questions, who, what, when, where, why, questions like that. And then you probe down a little bit into the categories that are kind of suspicious to you. You think this one might lead to something, the why might lead to something, or the where might lead to something. And then you get clarification, ask clarifying questions, and then you pin them down. You got them up against the wall. You pin them down to yes or no. Is it this? Is it that? But you get to the yes or no by asking a series of other questions. Remember, it's a funnel. You start out very broad category, who, what, when, where, why, etc. How. You're asking those types of questions. Then you're probing down. Where you think you've got a hit, you probe down, drill a little more deeply. And then you want to clarify, make sure you're on the right track, and then you go in, finally, to pin them on it. Yes or no. Is this the question? Yes or no. Okay? Is this the secret? Yes or no. Is this the answer? Yes or no. Depending on what you're working with, whether it's this exercise or in your real life or with your clients, you're going to find the yes or no is slightly different, of course, depending on what category you're working in. But it's the same process. And once you get good at it, which doesn't take much time at all, once you get good at it, you're going to be able to have a skill that you can teach to your clients. And they will be able to use it in the moments when it's very important to them, when they don't have you. And they're going to thank you over and over.